Chapter 13. Can I offer you something to drink? What do you have? I have beer and canned water. So many options, I smirked. I still have to drive a half hour back to town and shop for groceries, so I'll pass on the beer. Water, then? He asked. Did I want to risk having to pee a second time before I got home? No, I did not. Nah, I'm good. I have to go soon. I looked at the single sink run by a foot pump. How do you keep the beer and water cold? The beer is in a solar cooler, and I have a case of water in the closet. First, I should have guessed about the solar cooler, but where in the world do you have a closet in this place? It's next to the toilet. I've peeked behind the curtain, future guy. There's no closet in there. He grinned. Follow me. I stood up. Guide me, O wise one. Kier's handsome and slightly pretty face was awash with levity. Your wish is my command. I chuckled until I remembered he'd said he'd been born bonded to me. Not really, though, right? Like, you don't have to do what I say or anything like that, do you? His expression turned so serious it made me squirm. Yes. I felt the blood drain from my face. How can I couldn't formulate complete sentences. Probably a good thing. What if I accidentally told Kier to go to hell? Would he get a shovel and start digging? This was too much responsibility. Kier's frown turned up at the corners and he grinned. I'm just messing with you, Iris. I promise you. He placed his hands onto my shoulders. I have complete free will. I smacked him in the chest. You asshole. When he didn't react, I struck him again. He grabbed my hand and held it over his heart. I have made a commitment, Iris Everly. This means I had a choice. I am my own man, ruled by none but myself. But you said, and I meant it, every word. His gray eyes swirled, and I swear I saw flecks of gold. I have done all the preparations needed to help you, to guide you, to protect you, and to fight by your side. You are my calling, Iris. But no, you are not the boss of me. I felt the tension ease around my eyes. Okay, I said softly. He kept my hand as he tugged me toward the space under the loft. He pulled back the curtain and put his fingers on a half-circle handle on the wall where the toilet paper roll hung. It slid forward, revealing 3 drawers, a clothes rod with several suits hanging on it, and under the drawers was a case of canned water. So much room. Is that your entire wardrobe? He chuckled. I have hiding places all over this house. This isn't a house, I told him. This is a shoebox with windows. There was barely any room where we were standing, and Kier's hip brushed my stomach. Pardon me, he said politely, but he didn't move away. I stared up at him. His dark eyelashes weren't thick, but they were longer than mine. Why was that always the way? His nose was narrow and aquiline, his cheekbones high. And gosh, he had a sensual mouth. Wide, but not so broad that it didn't fit his face. His upper lip was slightly fuller than his lower. In other words, super kissable. I hadn't been this close to a man for well over a year, and according to doctors and psychologists, I was at my sexual peak. Kier cleared his throat, and the intensity of his gaze made me nervously glance away. God, did he know I was thinking about kissing him? About sex? We should, look at the grimoire before I go. Yes, absolutely, Kier agreed. He scooted past me quickly as if I were a hot poker and he was trying not to get burned. The book belonged to the first of your family, one of the witches of Island McGee. You and Blondie said I was a descendant from that place. What is it? Who were these witches? I sat back down on the couch, picked up the grimoire, and placed it on my lap. Does this mean you know the woman who gave birth to me? I wouldn't call her my mother. That title was strictly reserved for Grace Everly. I'm afraid I don't. I vaguely remember your mother's face from my visions of your birth, but it's been 43 years and a handful of days. And in my defense, I was only hours old. I've had millions of visions, along with living my life, since then. Did you ever have a vision of me meeting her? I mean, as an adult? He looked away for a moment, then shook his head. I'm sorry, Iris. She's either deceased or... She really has no interest in being a part of my life. I shrugged. I'm actually fine with that. I could feel the lie in my words. A couple days ago, I'd been content to never know where I came from before my parents took me in. But now, knowing I was a witch left me with so many questions for her. So what do you know? When I came into my moon, the circle I belonged to was able to trace your true craft back to the McGee Coven. What do you mean by you came into your moon? It sounds like a menstrual cycle for druids. His eyes danced with humor. There is bleeding, but it doesn't last long, and no sanitary pads are required. I patted the book and got back to the McGees. Are they still around? The Coven, I mean? He shook his head sadly. 8 of the 12 were murdered between 1710 and 1711 during the witch trials. And what happened to the other 4? Kier sat down next to me. My guess is they found ways to hide in the mundane world, or they moved. There isn't much written about the witches. The one thing we do know is that Island McGee has a history steeped in blood and tragedy. So you don't know why the woman who squeezed me out of her hoo-ha gave me up when I was 6 months old? Kier shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't. I'd had a good life with my parents and my siblings, and I'd always tried to look at the fact that my birth mom had given me up as a blessing. My family was the best. But finding out I had a magical bloodline put my birth story into a whole different light. Had my mother known what I was? Had she been a witch? Or maybe it had been my father? After all, Linda said Michael would eventually develop powers too. You should look to your grimoire, Kier said, as if he could read my mind, which I sincerely hoped wasn't a thing. They are the embodiment of your family's legacy. I placed my palm over the symbol and felt it pulsing as if it were alive. I lifted my hand away. I'm afraid to look. All this craziness started after this one bit me. Bit you? One of the silver threads broke and poked the tip of my finger. Ah. He stared off for a moment, as if in deep reflection, before turning his gaze back to me. I see it now. Your blood activated the magic contained within the pages. But the pages are blank. There is nothing on them. I fought back my frustration. I'm not sure the book can give me the answers I want. It will give you the answers you need, Iris. Okay, Mick Jagger, he chuckled. Rolling stones aside, the books are meant to unleash your true craft. I'd been drawn to that box of books, and if the grimoire had belonged to my family, how had it ended up with old Lady Boothwell? What if Kier had put it there himself to force my magical hand? The hairs on the back of my neck raised at the possibility. How did you know the book would be at the auction? Did you put it there for me to find? A witch's family grimoire has its own unique power. I have a feeling this book has been searching for you for a long time. I may have initiated the nudge to get you there, but if you hadn't gone to the estate sale, the grimoire would have found you another way. He gestured to the giant tome. Open the book. Let's see if it's ready to reveal itself to you. You do it, I said, full of apprehension. Nope, he said, then gave me a tight-lipped smile. See, I don't have to do something just because you say so. Yeah, but you could do it because it would be the nice bonded buddy thing to do, right? Not even then. This grimoire will only respond to you. When you blooded this one, it activated your terror craft. Now, you have to get it under control. I scratched the spot on my arm. Right. Wild magic bad? Super bad. I focused my resolve. Should I get the crystal from my purse? Linda said to bring it along. It will help when it comes to learning spells, but we're not going to be doing any of that right now. He rubbed his hands together eagerly. Let's just see what we're working with here. His enthusiasm surprised me. You're like a kid in a candy store. I didn't have to become a teacher of the occult. I did it because I actually dig this stuff. And come on, a grimoire from the Lost McGee Coven? That's a serious find. Nerd, I teased. I traced the symbol. The upside-down triangle with a line through it. You said at the auction that you knew what this symbol meant. It is the earth element sign. It is the signal of the element you have the most affinity for. Oh. That made sense, since Linda had been waiting in my garden for me to spark for several years. She must have known my magic would be tied to earth stuff. Okay, I'm going in. I flipped the cover open, careful this time to keep my fingers from getting pricked. That's strange, I said. I think the inscription has changed. Blood of my blood, your sacrifice received. Tears of my tears, do not be deceived. Know yourself, child, lest your magic be wild. Now it's begun, it cannot be undone. Goddess help you. What did it say before? It had said that blood was a sacrifice required, and that the sacrifice would bring what I desired, and that I shouldn't enter into this lightly because once it was started, it couldn't be undone. Wow, Keir said with awe. It's living text. I gave him a bland look. Have you never seen a grimoire before? Several. He moved his hand around over the page, but none that were activated. This is amazing. I'm so glad you're excited. It sounds pretty awful for the poor soul who accidentally made a blood offering to the damn thing. I'm sorry, Iris. Of course, you're right. But by the way he was eyeballing the book, I could see he still thought it was pretty damned cool. Turn the page. Let's see what's next. I did as he asked. Words began to appear. Names with dates and different handwriting styles and different inks. Adine McGee, 1678. Cleona Doone, 1705. Siobhan Adrian, 1782. Mary Ann Langford, 1834. Bridget O'Malley, 1880. Mira Roberts, 1912. Who are these women? Keir put his hand on my back and gave me a comforting pat. These are your ancestors, Iris. The ones who have possessed the book in the past. The last one was dated 1912. That's too old to be my mother, right? I mean, who knew? Maybe witches lived a long time? It would have been your grandmother, maybe a great-grandmother. So no one had the book after Mira? He furrowed his brow as he made a study of the names. It doesn't look like it. But none of them have the same last name. Traditionally, women took their husbands' names, or maybe some of them were adopted, like you. Duh. Up until a couple weeks ago, I'd been Iris Callahan for 18 years. Keir went outside for a moment, then came right back with his phone in his hand. I thought you didn't have any cell phone service up here. I don't, he said. I'd had to drive down the mountain about 5 miles to text you earlier. However, the camera feature does work. Can I take a picture of the names? I can do some research for you tomorrow and reach out to some of my contacts to dig up as much information on these women for you, but only if you want. I touched the list of names, the vellum smooth under my fingertip. Did you know what you were? I asked them. Or were you blindsided as well? Cleona Doone would have been around during the Island McGee witch trials. Had she escaped? Maybe. Or maybe she'd been murdered and her family, a daughter or a son, had escaped with the book. I wanted to know. Yes, I want you to find out as much about them as you can. Keir held up his phone. May I? I moved my hand so he had a clear shot of the list. He snapped the picture. Wait, he said. There's more writing coming up. Claim your birthright, this book of shadows. The fade or the bright, your intention hallows. It starts with a name. Goddess help you. Why does it always have to sound like a threat? I asked. It seems the book wants your name. I got that. However, I wasn't ready to write it down. I'd given the book what it wanted the night before, and it had given me the stuff of nightmares. I'm going to have to think about it. Don't take too long, Kier said. The sooner you bind the book to you, the sooner you can learn the secrets of your true craft. That's what I'm afraid of. I inhaled deeply to bolster my strength. Magic, or true craft, was happening to me whether I liked it or not. It wasn't a pile of laundry or a sink full of dishes I could put off until later. The patches on my arm burned and ached as a reminder of just how much I couldn't ignore it. Besides, if I allowed this magic to kick my butt and turn me into dust, what would happen to Michael? And without me, would he fall to the same fate of not knowing who or what he was? Would he burn out as well? I wouldn't let that happen. I wouldn't abandon my child the way I'd been abandoned. My gaze pivoted from the book to Kier. Do you have a pen? Chapter 14. The next day, I awoke with bark skin clear up to my elbow. My arm itched like crazy. I sprayed it with Benadryl spray, covered it in cortisone, and even coated it in oil to see if it would soften up. No avail. If things kept going the way they were, I would soon look like Treebeard from The Lord of the Rings. The only thing I could do was cover the eyesore until I could figure out how to deal with it. So I cut a hole in a sock and used the tube to cover my gross-looking skin. Neither Kier nor Linda had been helpful when it came to reversing the spell. Michael had been up all night killing zombies and werewolves with his online pals, so the kid would be zonked until late in the afternoon. I didn't have to worry about him getting up and coming to the garden anytime soon. I can't go on like this, Linda, I said as I sat down on the bench. I removed the sock and showed her my arm. This stuff is growing fast. She wrinkled her nose and made a face. Chances are good you'll be magic dust before it reaches your neck. That's not helpful, I said. How in the world did I manage to do this to myself? If you hadn't cast a spell in your kitchen, I might have been able to narrow it down. First, I didn't cast a spell. Second, what about the kitchen makes it so bad? I'm not going to fight with you about something as plain as your nose, Kleinkind. I'd finally looked up the words. Kleinkind was basically her calling me a toddler, which I didn't love, but it was better than floppy tits. Kleinkind was a sorcerer, which I'd already guessed, and Liebling was darling. The fact that she called me Liebling a couple of times had softened me to the old grump. Linda hopped up on the garden bench. Do you cook a lot? Yes, I said. I have a teenager who likes to eat. And do you cook with a lot of spices and herbs, like cinnamon, cloves, rosemary, basil, thyme, marjoram, bay, and the such? Yep, I have a mega spice rack. I loved all kinds of flavors. Then there's your answer. One of those herbs or spices acted as an agent for your spell work. Until you figure out which one, there is no reversing the action. This is why you study terra craft before evoking it. So I don't end up an ent? Ents are not real. Well, neither was talking gnomes until they were. I flexed my arm. The tendons were getting tight between my wrist and my elbow. What if what was happening on the surface was also happening in my muscles? Eep. What if I brought the spice rack out here? You can tell me what each one is used for, and when we get to the one that makes you grow a thick skin, we'll set things right. Or your neighbors will sprout limbs from their asses. I blanched. Is that a possibility? Linda quirked her head to the side. She shoved her hand in her pocket and pulled out a pipe. She put it to her lips and gave it a puff. Smoke billowed from her lips. Did you have lit tobacco in your pocket? I'm made of stone, Kleinkind. It's not like I'm going to catch on fire. But your clothes are also made of stone. She shook her head, consternation written all over her face. Just when I start to think you are not so ignorant, you remind me how wrong I am. And just when I start to think I could love you, you're mean as shit to me. She raised a hairy brow. Your idea about this spice rack has merit. Bring it to me. I have a lot of spices, I said. Learning about the power of herbs and aromatics is a good lesson. In other words, she didn't care. I walked backward to the kitchen with an eye on the gnome the whole time. I was tired of getting pelted by dirt clods. You're learning, she cackled. Inside, I grabbed a sturdy tote from under the counter and started chucking everything from my rack into it. When I was done, the bag weighed 30 pounds. I had a few essential oils I threw in for good measure: lavender, peppermint, and tea tree. It dawned on me I had some fresh herbs as well in the fridge. I only took out items that had been here before my shopping trip: cilantro, parsley, mint, garlic, and kale. Was kale an herb? I wasn't sure, so I threw it in as well. Oh, and I had some pickled peppers. Dried peppers were a spice, so the jar made it in the bag. Now it felt about 50 pounds as I lugged it out to the gnome. Did you pack the kitchen sink? Linda asked. Har har. I carefully put the bag down. Most of the spices were in glass bottles, and I didn't want the pickled peppers to break and spill vinegar everywhere. Anything that seemed like it would fit the bill of an herb or a spice is in there. Linda reached in and pulled out the peppers first and frowned. Peppers are great for sexual mojo spells, but pickled peppers are bound to sour a relationship. Good to know. I scratched my arm, but not for protection spells. Nope. Linda pulled out the cilantro. Another love spell ingredient. The kale was next. This should be tossed immediately. Is it dangerous? I asked. No, Linda replied. It's just gross. I rolled my eyes. Next. She grabbed the parsley. This could have contributed. Parsley is extensively used in purification rituals, but it also is good in strength spells. Didn't you say your ex-Arschloch was thrown from you? I nodded. Yep. A hint of a smile played on my lips. He hid his head on the fridge. Linda chuckled. It's going in the maybe pile. Basil was next. Love and protection. Also, money, Linda said. I'll put it in the maybe pile. I made a mental note of the money aspect. Michael's senior year would be expensive. Linda must have read it in my face because she added, Every spell costs something. Sometimes that price is small. Sometimes it's not. Like growing bark on my skin. She nodded. Exactly. I can't imagine your intention when you wished for a sick skin meant turning into a tree. But the combination of getting that man away from you and growing a sick skin had this unintended consequence. Your price to pay. Ah, she said as she retrieved another bottle. Bay leaves. These are great for banishing evil and negative energy from your home. I better buy a case of it then. Does it work on grouchy gnomes? Linda ignored me. It's also good for physical feats. Your son's an athlete. You should grind up a little bay leaf to throw into his food before games. I'll wait until I've mastered something easy. You know, like not destroying myself. Fair enough, Linda said. Aha! Here's some oregano. Another one good for love and protection spells. There sure are a lot of these things used for love spells. Earth is the most romantic of all the elements. Yes, rocks and dirt are so sexy. I lifted my affected arm. And my bark shake brings all the boys to the yard. Dolt, she muttered. Diamonds and gold are Earth's elements too. Are you saying they're not sexy? She had me there. We spent the next 2 hours going over each herb and spice, with Linda spending several minutes on each one. She explained their properties, how they were activated with true craft, and how each one gave witches the ability to practice magic without paying a personal toll. The herbs and spices, and even the essential oils, paid the price instead. Linda thinned her lips at me as she dug through the bag for the next item. Her face lit up as she pulled a small bottle out. Wunderbar! What did you find? Peppermint oil. She snapped her fingers at me. Go get your grimoire. But it's still empty other than the incantation and the other witches' names. It won't be for long, Kleinkind. Do as I ask. It had been more of an order than a request, but I didn't argue with her. I'm going. And bring a pen, she said. One that has special meaning for you, if you can manage. An heirloom, possibly. I didn't have anything like that. However, I had the ballpoint Kier had given me the day before, and as far as special goes, well, I'd used it to seal myself to the grimoire. That was monumental, right? Speaking of Kier, I was waiting for him to message me about his research, so I checked my phone. I had one message, but it wasn't from the dashing druid professor. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Hey, Iris, this is Lou from the other night. I forgot to text, so you'd have my number. Call me if you need a night out. That was so nice. It had been a while since I'd hung out with anyone that wasn't my kid or a sibling. I didn't count Linda or Kier because their presence was directly related to me getting magical powers, not for fun. I texted her back. Busy every day for the next week. Work stuff. Let's have lunch the first week of June. If I was still alive, that is. I didn't say that, though. It's a date, but only if you make it drinks and dancing, she messaged back. I giggled. You got it. It was oddly comforting having one aspect of my life that didn't revolve around my divorce, my kid, or true craft. Bob jumped up on my table and meowed at me. I gave him the stink eye. If Linda sent you in here to hurry me up, I'm hurrying, I told him. He made cutesy squeaks that I swear sounded like denials. I'm just teasing you, Bob. I know you wouldn't do me like that. I wore my favorite yoga pants today, aka they had pockets, so I tucked the phone in them. Dear designers, I thought ruefully, pockets belong in all of women's wear. I retrieved the grimoire from my bedroom, peeked in on Michael, still snoring away, and hustled back out to the garden. I set it on the bench and opened it up. Now what? Linda rubbed her stubby fingers together. This is a milestone, Liebling. What is? The recording of a first spell. She gestured to a paving stone in front of the bench. Sit. I did, but I swore if she told me to stay, I was going to knock her gnome block off. Bob wormed his way under my arm and curled in my lap. What a sweet little chunky chunk, I cooed. The imp cat body vibrated pleasantly as he purred. Good, Linda said. The imp will help you focus the spell. I scratched under Bob's chin. I thought you said I wasn't ready for spells. We're not doing it yet. If Linda had been carrying a ruler, she'd have smacked me with it. You must understand a spell and how it works before you invoke it. That's how you control the true craft instead of casting with your emotions. What do I do first? This is a rudimentary spell. You will have to add a variation to make it yours. This is why it's so important to understand the materials you work with. I guess peppermint is part of it. Yes, Linda said. Not only does it smell great and keep mice away, but it is also a clarifying agent. Your magic knows what ingredients it drew from to cast the spell. I can't help you undo the work, but I do know how to create a clarifying and seeking potion. If you can get it right, it should show you how the spell was crafted. So this is a potion? Yes. I don't possess true craft, but you don't have to be a practitioner to understand and utilize nature. She steepled her fingers. Do you have your pen? Yep. I pulled the ballpoint from my pocket. Got it right here. I opened the book to the first empty page. Ready. 5 drops of peppermint oil, a teaspoon of ground bay leaf, grind 3 leaves of basil, add a pinch of cinnamon and a pinch of sage. My sized pinch or yours? I asked as I scribbled it all down. Yours, Linda said, giving me an approving look. Do you have any chamomile in the house? Yep, I have some chamomile tea that has been sitting around since before my mother died. She was the only one who could drink the stuff. Does it matter how old it is? It should be fine, Linda said. However, I didn't love her worried expression. Note to self, buy chamomile that hasn't expired. What else? It's your turn to make the potion your own. Linda dumped the bag out onto the grass. Are there any of these ingredients that are calling to you? My skin had been buzzing since I'd signed the book. It was hard to feel anything else. Then I spotted the anise. I used the licorice-tasting spice occasionally when I made Chinese food. However, it wasn't the taste that attracted my attention. It was the shape. The anise, also called star anise, reminded me of the scar on Kier's wrist. I picked up the bottle. This one, I said. Linda nodded. Add 2 to the mix. What do I mix it with? You'll want purified water. Will distilled water work? I kept a jug for my mini steam cleaner. That'll do. 1 cup of the water. Bring it to a boil in a glass pot. Add the spell ingredients. Stir with a non-metal spoon and let it steep for 15 minutes. I had a glass measuring cup I could heat the water in. Does it matter if I microwave the water? Linda shook her head. No, that'll do. Then what? Then you draw yourself a bath, dump the potion in. Strain or no strain? No strain. Yuck, but okay. I didn't relish the idea of little bits of herbs getting caught in my cracks, but I'd do what needed to be done. Anything else? Repeat your intention for the potion, taking deep breaths in between until the potion works. I nodded, then wrote down the rest of the directions. What should I say? Do I have to do everything for you, Kleinkind? Words. You tell the potion what you want, and you focus on your intention. The potion will help set the limit. Do not let your thoughts stray. Ask for the clarification you need. Ask for guidance. Then relax and let the magic function as it should. Is this a good idea? Potion spells aren't as dangerous. You are borrowing energy from the ingredients, not yourself. You will be fine. Take the imp with you. He can help you focus your limits. As she walked back to her spot in front of the bench, she muttered, I hope. I heard you, Linda. Great. I was going to try a spell again. What could possibly go wrong? If I boil my ass, you're going to feel really bad. I'd be more worried about turning to dust. Boiling your ass is a step up. Go. Do. She flicked her hand at me, then turned back to stone. Chapter 15. Thanks to Linda's game of 52 spice jar pickup, I had to spend several minutes gathering up all the kitchen items to bring back into the house. The gnome ignored my muttered curses. What were the odds that I could steep my potion and get into the bath before Michael got up? Did it matter? He'd seen me through several diet fads, including this past month of kale. Kale shakes, kale chips, stir-fry kale, kale salads, and so on. The leafy green veg wasn't too bad as long as you liked eating dirt. I hadn't, which is why I had a whole bag left over. Linda had been right. Kale is gross. I threw the bag away before putting the other items, except for the ingredients I needed, away. I kept the distilled water in the laundry room. I dusted the top of the jug and realized it had been a long time since I'd used the steam cleaner. I grimaced. I hope distilled water didn't expire. Nah, I thought. It's fine. I was hesitant with the chamomile, but it was packaged in a foil pouch, so it still smelled like it would make tea. I boiled the water in my 4-cup Pyrex measuring cup, then mixed in the ingredients with a wooden spoon as Linda had directed. My energy hummed pleasantly inside me as I stirred counterclockwise. I guessed my magic was happy with what I was doing. That made one of us. I set the timer for it to steep when Michael came sauntering into the kitchen. Morning. His eyes were swollen in an I've been up all night staring at a giant television screen without blinking kind of way. Morning, babe. Are you up for the day, or are you going back to bed? It was only 10 a.m., and I'd fully expected he wouldn't be getting up until much later. I told Doug I'd come over and shoot some hoops this morning. He rubbed his eyes, and I could see he clearly regretted his decision. You can always cancel or tell him you'll come over later. I bet he isn't even out of bed. Michael sighed and pulled his phone out of his shorts pocket because, of course, men had pockets and everything. He's blowing up my text. He showed me his screen with a dozen messages from Doug telling Michael to get up, get up, get up. My phone beeped. I slipped it from my pocket to sneak a peek, hoping it was Keir. It was not. Is Michael awake? I showed my son my screen. Doug is very persistent. I snapped a picture of the kid flipping off the phone and sent it to Doug with a, "He's up." Doug sent back several thumbs-up emojis. Will you be gone long? Having him out of the house when I worked my mojo in the tub was to my advantage. At least if I blew up the bathroom, he wouldn't be here to see it. Note to self, ask Linda to cover my body if the spell kills me so my son doesn't have to see his dead mama naked. I wasn't really worried about dying. If Linda was confident, then so was I. Anyway, I was more likely to turn to dust than leave a corpse behind. I'm going to stay the night if that's okay. Sure. I narrowed my gaze on him. If there's any drinking or drugging, there will be no driving, and if you get into trouble, you call me right away. Yep, he said, blinking his eyes until he could get them wider than slits. Did you wash my gray joggers? I hadn't washed clothes in a week. Thankfully, I had 10 gazillion pairs of stretchy yoga pants and loose flowing tops. Most importantly, I had enough underwear to last me several months without running out of clean pairs. I exaggerate, of course, but only a little. You know where the laundry soap is? He frowned and said, Why does it stink in here? As he left the kitchen. Love you too, I yelled after him. Good, I thought. Kid out. Operation Clarification is a go. I heard the washing machine start up and smiled. Excellent. My evil plan to turn him into an independent adult was working. Another beep of my phone had me cursing. Damn it, Michael. Text Doug back. I did, he yelled back. I opened my messages. Oh, it was Keir finally. Found some history on 3 of your ancestors. Is now a good time to come over? Give me an hour. I wanted to try the clarification spell before Keir arrived. Hopefully, Michael would be on his way to Doug's by then. Or even better, if I don't answer the door, please come in and hide the body. What? I shot him back a thumbs up like Doug had with me. If the man could see thousands of my futures playing out and exploding in a tub wasn't one of them, then yay me. The timer went off on the potion. I should have been scared. All this freaking stuff happening to me was flippin' scary. Instead, I was excited. I grabbed the measuring cup. Ouch, still hot. I adjusted my grip on the handle. I exited the kitchen and headed to my private bathroom in the master bedroom. I heard the second bathroom shower turn on. Don't use all the hot water, I yelled to Michael. His music started playing loudly, so I couldn't be sure if he heard me. I set the potion down on the vanity. When Evan and I picked this place, we both loved the en-suite bathroom. It had a large walk-in shower for him and a separate garden tub for me. Now, both the shower and the tub were all mine. Michael's bathroom was just on the other side of the wall. I wasn't sure I would find my zen to do the clarification spell with gypsy punk blaring in the background. Although it was better than K-pop, but not by much. Actually, I didn't mind any of the music most of the time, but I needed some peace and quiet right now. I wanted to center myself, so I left the smelly herbal minty potion in the bathroom and went back outside to the garden. Did you do it? Linda asked. Not yet, I sat on the bench, waiting for the kid to leave. I glanced at the gnome, who wasn't moving anything but her lips at the moment. Does it matter if the stuff cools down? Nope, she said. Most witches bottle the potions and sell them. So I can make this a side hustle if I need a little cash, huh? I grunted. Good to know. If you can stay alive long enough. I'm really getting tired of your Debbie Downer attitude, Linda. And I'm just really tired, Liebling. I stared at the gnome. Was she paler than usual? And why wasn't she animating? Is something wrong? I just need to rest, she said. Moving above ground is difficult for my kind. We are not creatures of the air. It takes effort. You always seem to move so fast. It's my age. I'm still a youngling, and that comes with agility. Even so. You're 200 years old. Yes. Not that long ago, I was a twinkle in my daddy's eye. She paused for a moment. I didn't want you to see me like this. I thought I'd have time to recharge. But I forget how needy young witches can be. Especially toddlers like me, huh? I was being sarcastic. It was wasted on Linda. Most especially, she lamented. Okay, good talk. I braced myself to get up, then noticed pretty pink clusters of flowers on my cleome plant. That didn't usually bloom until mid to late June. I looked around the garden and saw that several of my flowers and flowering bushes were blooming. Linda, what's going on with the plants? She smiled. They are called by your earth magic. It's a good thing. My eyes misted. The green leaves were greener, all the plants looked healthy and lush, and the flowers were all the colors of the rainbow. My mom would have loved this, I whispered. Grace was a special woman, Linda agreed. She had a connection to nature that cannot be taught. She shifted her eyes toward me and gave me a dull look. No matter how much I wish it was so. We don't have to talk, I replied with the same lack of enthusiasm. You rest up. After about 10 minutes of meditating on not scratching my arm off, I heard Michael yell from the kitchen window. See ya! A few seconds later, I heard his car start. Calgon, or in this case, clarification spell, take me away, I said. Finally, some alone time, Linda bitched. Bob pounced on her head. I laughed harder than I should have. Linda expended effort she claimed she didn't have and shooed Bob away. Come on, my little chonky monster, I told him. Let's leave the crotchety old gnome alone. I let the water fill up in the tub as I undressed, tied my hair up in my bath turban, and poured the potion on in. Ick. It turned the water a greenish gray, and the bits and pieces of herbs floated around. I climbed in and sat down. Cripes! Something pinched my butt. I leaned to the side, and a single star anise floated to the surface. This gig should come with hazard pay, I said as I flicked it away. Zen, I thought. Find the zen. I took a deep breath and blew it out. Let the hot water soak my cares away. Give me the strength to me this day. Guide me through the light and the dark. Help me get rid of this awful bark. Mentally, I added, I want my damn skin back to normal. I didn't want actual thick skin. You're supposed to know my heart, according to Linda. So now would be a good time for you to give me an accurate reading. In other words, I tried to keep my intention super transparent. I took another deep breath and exhaled. Help me see what I cannot see. An eye for the truth, you... Shoot, these rhymes were not easy. I already had mad respect for poets, but now it was doubly so. I exhaled again. An eye for truth. No, maybe mentioning my eye was a bad thing. I didn't want my misfiring magic to hit another body part. A mind for the truth. Better, I thought. A heart not denied. This spell better work because I have clarified. Once again, I sent it my intention. And by clarified, I'm not talking about butter. I mean, I want to know what I need to know to survive all this intact and not covered in tree bark or any other organic or non-organic matter. This was starting to feel very much like bargaining with a djinn. You had to be very specific because genies liked to loosely interpret your wishes. At least in fiction. I wasn't sure if real genies existed, and really, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I had enough on my plate as it was. I inhaled a few more times deeply as I let the minty scent wash over me. The bathroom began to shake as the water around me sloshed. Bob, who'd been curled up on the toilet, rose up on his tippy toes and hissed. A glass container with Q-tips jostled across the vanity and smashed on the floor. What is going on? Surely this wasn't a side effect from me splitting the pool the day before. I pulled the plug on the drain and carefully got out of the tub so I wouldn't cut my feet on the broken glass. The quaking subsided, but a loud pop had me racing to throw my clothes on. One leg in my pants and one leg out, I hopped through the house. When I got to the kitchen, I looked out the window and gasped. Linda was fighting a 10-foot rock with arms and legs, and there was a massive hole in the center of my garden. I grabbed a knife from the knife drawer. Would a knife work on a rock? I threw it in the sink and grabbed a hammer from the utility drawer. Better. I raced outside to help my gnome with Bob hot on my heels. I swear this wasn't me, I told Linda. I know, Kleinkind, she said. This is one of the rock trolls I warned you about, and it is starving for your magic. Chapter 16. I held the hammer aloft over my head, feeling ridiculous. Grabbing the ball peen was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. The gun in this case was a stupidly large rock beast covered in vines and hanging moss and could crush me with its pinky toe. How do we stop this thing? Linda, who looked as freaked out as I felt, shook her head. I've already tried to sing him home, but he won't budge. The bird troll is determined to have you. Well, he can't, I snapped. I shook my hammer at the troll. You can't have me. His response was to send down a crashing fist toward my head. I jumped out of the way, but he nearly nailed me. I was already breathing hard when I rolled to my feet. Linda's game of dirt dodging had not adequately prepared me for whack-a-troll. If I got out of this alive, I promised myself I would start working out with Rose. Tell me what to do, I begged Linda. Run, she shouted. Keep it busy. Contain it within the gates. A troll on the loose in town will be hard to explain. You think? Oh, my word. I hadn't run in years. However, when the troll took a giant step in my direction, the adrenaline rush was the wind beneath my wings. I dashed to the back of the yard. The stupid troll crushed a bunch of my plants when it followed after me. I went back and forth between keeping the troll in the backyard or leading it through the gate. I would survive the people of South Hill Village finding out that there were more than just humans living in our neck of the woods. I couldn't claim the same odds of surviving the rock monster trying to eat me if I stayed put. Num, num, the troll said. Get in my tum. Eep, it talked, in actual words. I was officially freaking out. He swiped a massive paw at me, his fingertips brushing my head and sending me careening face first into the fence. I smashed my nose and let out an angry cry. I whipped around. No, I screamed. Stop! Surprisingly, the grotesque beast did as I asked. Mortal want. He opened and closed his hammy fist, indicating he wanted me to walk to him. No, thank you. His thick, bushy brows knitted together as his lips curled into a snarl. Mortal want magic. Was his name Mortal? I was guessing so. Mortal can suck a big slimy toad. He looked back and forth on the ground. Where toad? His skin had a gray cast to it that reminded me of the bark on my arm. He was moving closer to me. What in the world was Linda doing? Why was I handling this by myself? My feet felt frozen to the ground as the weight of what was happening settled in. Linda! Figure it out, she said. I'm busy. Busy doing what? It certainly wasn't saving me. Some earth guardian she was turning out to be. I needed to think, to formulate a plan. What was a rock troll's weakness? Other than fictional stories of trolls under bridges who hid treasures and ate babies, I had little knowledge about the terrible creatures. The fear that kept me frozen in place eased, and as an eerie calmness settled over me. When I was in the tub asking for clarity, this was the exact situation where it would have come in handy. The nards. Linda called the troll a he, and males typically had testicles. Even my butthole-free imp had them. If I could get close enough without getting pummeled, I could probably nail him with the hammer in his happy place. At my core, I knew my plan was awful, but I had nothing else. As if Bob knew I was thinking about him, he leapt onto the troll's head, gouged at his eyes with his claws. My hope soared. Bob was the distraction I needed. I ran up to the troll, coming in low while he swung his arms windmill style, trying to dislodge the imp. I slid like a baseball player between the troll's legs and swung the ball peen with all my might. The terrifying rock beast didn't even flinch. Instead, it flung Bob from his head and reached out a surprisingly fast hand and grabbed me around the waist. "Linda," I gasped out. "A little help?" The ground beneath me gave out. I screamed as I fell 20 feet down with the rock troll next to me. When we landed, I was thrown a good 5 feet from him, but the walls were steep and built with smooth, red and gray igneous rock. In other words, I was trapped. "Liebling!" Linda shouted. "I built the trap for the troll, not you. What are you doing down there?" "Dying, obviously," I told her. "Christ, Linda, get me out of here." Bob jumped down into the pit. The troll smashed him under his foot. "No!" I screamed. "Leave him alone!" Mortal began to laugh, or at least I thought he was laughing as he twisted his foot over my precious Bob and ground him into the ground. "I'll kill you!" I screamed, launching myself at the troll. My attack surprised Mortal because he staggered back. Bob wasn't moving, and his body looked like someone had driven a steamroller over it. I yanked on one of the vines growing out of the troll's neck with one hand and punched him in the face with the other. The troll grabbed my hand and chomped down on my arm, the one with the bark. The pressure was painful, but it didn't break the skin. With my non-barky hand, I jammed my thumb into the rock troll's watery globe of an eye. It roared as it tried again to bite through my arm. The thick skin didn't even crack. It was risky, but what did I have to lose? He killed my Bob, and since my entire body wasn't covered in the impervious bark soon, he would kill me too. I could do this. I fractured an entire community pool with my thoughts. How hard could a rock troll be? I stared at Mortal in his one good eye. "I'm going to pop your head like a melon," I promised. "Crack, crack," I said. "Down the middle you will split. Crack, crack, you gigantic piece of shit." I filled my words and my magic with so much intention, I worried that I would indeed break the mountain as the sound of lightning echoed through the 4 walls of the cage Linda had built. I don't know who looked more surprised, Mortal or me, as he divided in 2, both halves of him flopping to the ground and me along with him. I learned a couple of things about rock trolls at that moment. 1, they are not solid rock like you might think. Nope, they are full of blood and guts and even a tiny amount of brain. And 2, their insides stink worse than their outsides. Linda tunneled out of the base. "This way!" she shouted. Her face blanched when she saw me lying in the troll goo. "What happened?" A gasping sob escaped me. Bob! He killed Bob!" Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I made the mistake of wiping at them with my gut-covered hands. I pointed at my flattened cat. "Oh, Bob." Then the strangest thing I'd ever seen, and after the past couple of days I'd seen a lot of weird shit, happened. Bob's smushed body began to inflate. His paws, his head, his body, and his tail. There were cracks and hisses and squishy sounds that made my teeth ache. But in a matter of seconds, Bob was on his feet. He bounded over to me and jumped into my lap. He tipped his head up and licked me. "Ew, Bob, don't do that. I got gross troll yuck on me." I didn't realize I was laughing until Linda started laughing too. What a ridiculous mess we were. "I'm sorry I didn't get here sooner, Liebling. I had to make the tunnel big enough for you to get out," she said. "It all worked out," I smiled fondly at Bob. "Didn't it, my goodest boy?" Bob purred in response. I held up my barky arm. And believe it or not, this damn thing saved my life. Maybe the magic knew what I needed after all, though I really don't want to keep it. "How did you do it?" Linda asked. "How did you defeat the rock troll?" "I used your first lesson, and I cracked him like an egg." She laughed. I guess we're lucky the mountain is still standing. It was a concern, I admitted. So you have a way out? Linda took off her hat, and underneath her head was a shiny, hairless dome. I've made a tunnel with stairs for you. You're bald, I said. Of course I am, dolt. She yanked her hat back down to her ears. Now get out of here, so I can start filling in the ground. It won't do for Michael or one of your many siblings to see any of this. I stood up, but I was barefoot and my feet were slick. I slipped in the ick, splashing down on my rear. Linda snickered. Not funny, I said. She shrugged. We take our small pleasures where we can. Bob made an almost howling sound. I think the smell was getting to him. I know it was getting to me. Iris, a man said. I looked up and saw Keir standing at the edge of the pit. Are you okay? Awesome timing, I said. Keep this up and I'm going to start calling you the late Kreskin. Chapter 17. I sent out a prayer of thanks to whoever was listening that Michael had gone to stay the night at Doug's house. Linda had called in the gnome Dauncey, and there were 12 near replicas of my grumpy guardian hard at work putting my yard back together. There was a reason they were called garden gnomes. I'd showered Mortal off of me using an entire tube of body wash and half a bottle of shampoo in the process. Even when I looked clean, I could still smell him. I might need to buy some tomato juice, I said to Keir as I walked into the kitchen drying my hair. I think the troll was part skunk. I can still smell it. Keir made a face. It's bad. You might try hydrogen peroxide, baking soda, and the blue liquid dish soap. Some chemist discovered it neutralized skunk smells. He turned his head away as I crossed to the sink to look out the window. You might want to air dry your clothes after you wash them because the dryer heat might bake the smell in. The only place those clothes are going is in a burn pile, I told him. Linda and her crew had already filled in the hole and were starting on sowing sod. They are speedy. I was definitely impressed. Gnomes are of the earth. It makes them efficient. And then some. My yard didn't look like a giant troll just trying to eat me anymore, so I was calling it a win. The fight had taken it out of me. At over 40, I didn't bounce back the way I used to. I'm so tired, I said. I don't know if I have the energy to fight anyone or anything else. The worry about what was coming next knotted my gut. Do you think more will come? Linda had mentioned fairies, elves, and trolls, along with the extremely dangerous Die Hexenmeister. I got lucky with the troll. I'm not sure I will get lucky anymore. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I was on my way into town before I knew what was happening. I saw so many... He sighed. I'm just grateful you made it. Me too. I braced myself against the counter. I reacted with instinct today, Keir. I wasn't thinking about the costs. Now I'm scared. I took a life. Even if it was a gross troll that was trying to kill me, I would think something like that is going to exact a major price. Keir nodded. The price was paid by the rock troll. His death was the magic's price. Did Linda teach you about how ingredients work in a potion or a spell? I nodded. Those ingredients pay the cost of the magic. In this case, the troll was your ingredient. I made a face. How awful. I thought about what Linda had said about the Hexenmeister, how they sacrificed witches for the magic. Is that what I'd done? Had I sacrificed the troll not to gain magic, but to satisfy it? Is that the way true craft operated? The overwhelming feeling of despair shook me. How am I any different from the people who want to kill me to take my powers? Especially if I know that to use my magic, something has to die. Keir braved my stench to stand beside me. He put his arm around me and I leaned into his shoulder. That's not always the case, he said. Sometimes the price is happiness, joy, love. I don't understand. When you see Michael smile or laugh, how does it make you feel? I looked up at him. Wonderful. Kier smiled at me. That's magic, too. Thanks. I felt a little better, but I wasn't sure I completely believed him. When I'd been asked to pick between the bright and the fade, I hadn't been able to decide. And after I created the spell, I knew in my heart what it meant to be bright. But killing the troll, it had been 100% fade. Is my indecision about which path I should follow putting me in more jeopardy? Do you think that's why I'm more at risk of burning up? I'm not going to lie to you, Iris. Knowing your path might help you get control of your magic. But the real risk is in your power. My order hasn't felt anything like your strength in a long time. It's both exciting and frightening. I thought you guys were all about finding witches and bonding with them. He chuckled and shook his head. What happened to me when I was born is a rarity now, even as it was back in Merlin's day. Druids do seek out those of the true craft and act as guides. We seek to get as many to the other side of their magic without dying. It's one of our many acts of faith. But what I have with you, the way we are connected, only happens once every millennium. You are the Arthur of this time. I will not be pulling a sword from a stone. Probably not, Kier smirked. And I won't be anyone's king. I can barely rule myself. You are so much more than you can even imagine, Iris. I have a pretty good imagination. Why don't you try me? He looked away. I wish I could tell you. But telling me changes the future, I said. Kier nodded. What I can say is that what's coming will require you to be at your full strength. So you have to do everything possible to conquer Terracraft. It is the only way to protect yourself. I'll do whatever I have to do, I swear it. Especially if it meant keeping Michael and my family safe. What did you learn about the women who signed the grimoire? Not much about Aideen McGee or Cleona Doone. Those two would have originated at Island McGee just north of Belfast in Ireland. But Siobhan Adrian lived down south on the coast in Galway until she died in 1784. I sucked in a breath. That's only 2 years after she signed the book. Kier's brow furrowed. It's true. She had 2 children, a son and a daughter. The daughter died at the age of 16, but the son survived. His name isn't in the book. I gave Kier a sharp look. There are no men in the book. He nodded. That's true. Male witches often go their whole lives without a sparking event. Sometimes the women don't spark either. That's why it can seem as if whole generations pass before one of them becomes a practitioner of the true craft. But Linda said Michael was a witch. Does this mean he won't have any magic? Michael is your son, so yes, he is a witch. He'll always have the potential to spark, but it doesn't mean he will. What are his odds of a normal life? With you for a mother? He smiled. Chances are good he'll be extraordinary, but the odds of him sparking are low. It always is for the men of your species. Would his element be earth like mine, or something else? Female witches are more prone to earth and water, while males are more likely to be fire or wind practitioners. The covens of old liked to have a nice mix of all 5 elements. 5? What was left? Kier took a piece of paper from the grocery list tablet hanging on the fridge. Next, he retrieved a pencil from my utility drawer, reminding me that my hammer was at the bottom of the pit with the troll goop. He drew a pentagram with the star upright, and he finished it off with a circle around it. Each point of the star was giving a letter, S, W, F, E, A, moving from the topmost point to the right in clockwise order. He pointed to the E. That's Earth, he said. Terracraft draw their power from nature and earth elementals like Linda the Gnome. He went to A next. Air, Aerocraft. Power comes from wind, of course, and it has its own elemental creatures like sprites and winged fae. The F is fire, Ignicraft. The W is for water, Nerocraft. He glanced at me, then pointed to the top letter. S, he said, is spirit, Animacraft. Its power is drawn from the very soul of the world. There are no elementals for this discipline. The magic involves channeling and summoning spirits to fuel spell work. It's the most dangerous of the 5. Animacraft witches are rare because it is the most volatile of all the elements, and 99% of the time, a novice witch will not survive to master it. I shivered. The idea of dealing with ghosts and other spooky stuff, along with the increased likelihood of dying, made me glad I got something as mundane as Earth. Trolls and the like be damned. I'm glad I got Earth now. And the fact that you've taken out a mountain rock troll will deter those who aren't serious about wanting to take your power from you. Yay me, I said without enthusiasm. There was something childlike about Mortal that, if he hadn't stomped my imp into the ground, I might have felt sorry for him. As if conjured, Bob weaved between my legs. I moved out from under Kier's arm and picked him up. You know, he's modeled himself after a Manx cat. It is an Irish cat with a bobbed tail. He took his phone out of his pocket and searched for images in the browser. Here, see? I bounced Bob in my arms as I looked at all his multicolored and patterned twins. They are adorable. I scratched Bob under the chin. Just like you are. Kier shook his head and chuckled. What? That imp has you wrapped around his tiny claws. Damn right he does. You know they're designed that way. Linda had said something similar, that he was made for me to love, or something to that effect. What do you mean? He's your familiar. Your spark pulled him from his realm and landed him on your doorstep. His biology is such that he emits hormones mixed with some impish magic to increase a witch's oxytocin level. The cuddle hormone? I said with a laugh. I'd learned all about it when my Braxton Hicks coach explained to us mothers and fathers how oxytocin was the hormone that made us fall in love with our babies. It was also true of puppies and kittens. Increased production made you literally want to cuddle with the object of your affection, hence the cuddle hormone. Increased oxytocin also made you feel good, and who couldn't use a little bit of that kind of magic? I gave Bob a gentle hug. I don't care how the sausage is made. I'm happy to be eating it. Bob yawned, his mouth stretched wide and his tongue out and curled. I glanced at Kier. How can you not love this face? Because he's not trying to make me love him? I shrugged. Fair enough. I set Bob back on the floor. You said you found out some stuff on 3 of the women. Who else? Bridget O'Malley lived in York, England. She had to be a descendant of Siobhan Adrian's son. Still, I can't find much out about her family because she was a foundling and was put into an apprenticeship at a textile plant when she was around 8 years old. When she was 15, she married a shoemaker named Roger O'Malley. She died in 1894 at the age of 36 during childbirth. It was her 10th pregnancy. Only 2 of her children survived beyond a few months. The tragedy of all her losses broke my heart. Who else? Mira Roberts, the last to sign the book. She came over to the United States as a refugee during the First World War in 1914. I was able to find her immigration card, and it had her listed as being from France. She had 1 child listed, but the name was impossible to read. The husband was listed as deceased. So she'd signed the book before coming to America? He nodded. And she probably remarried after she arrived in New York. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any sign of her except for the card. I searched some French databases, but their records weren't much better. At least it's something, I said. Do you think she brought the book? I can't imagine she would have been allowed to bring too many items with her. Kier put his hand on mine. It would have been hard for her to leave it behind, but maybe. Either way, the book made its way here to this remote mountain village to find you. The gnomes were replanting the uprooted shrubs in the garden, and it was nearly back to its original beauty. And with it, I said, gnomes and trolls, and heaven only knows what else. Chapter 18. The next day, I awoke with every single one of my muscles aching and on fire. Kier had stayed with me until the gnomes had finished their work, but I'd just been so tired and worn out that I'd told him to go so I could get some sleep. He'd been reluctant, but I insisted. And now, after a good 12 hours of sleep, I hurt in places I didn't even know I could hurt. I groaned as I rolled sideways on my bed, my arms refusing to have any part of the process. Fighting a troll had taken its toll on me, so I lay there for a long moment contemplating whether to keep trying or just pee the bed. I'd paid a lot of money for the mattress shortly after Evan had moved out. I didn't want to sleep in our bed, not with the Evan-sized dent on what had been his side. Nope. So I dragged the mattress, by myself, out to the street curb the next day. My dad brought his truck over that afternoon and hauled it away for me. After, he took me shopping for a new one. I'd spent half the money in my savings account on a top-of-the-line foam mattress guaranteed not to lose its shape for 20 years. It was the mattress I'd wanted years earlier, but Evan had said it was a luxury we couldn't afford since my work was so unstable. Evan could bite me. My new bed was like sleeping on a hug, and I didn't regret one damn dime. And there was one other feature about the bed that I loved. I reached over to the nightstand, grabbed the remote control that I never used, and held down the top button. The head of the bed slowly began to rise. When it was all the way up, I managed to stand. I felt almost as victorious as I had when I defeated the troll, until I started walking. Oh, damn. I would never, ever snicker at my dad when he complained of achy joints. If he hurt even a fraction of what I did, the man deserved a medal for getting out of bed every morning. I'd been so distracted by the pain that I hadn't noticed my barking arm was no longer covered in the gray husky material. The tub potion must have worked. I let out a squee of joy, then dialed it back as I peed a little. Note to self, no celebrating until the bladder is empty. With a lot of effort and a fair amount of cussing, I managed my morning routine of showering, brushing my teeth, sort of combing my hair — it was impossible to get my arms over my head — before dressing myself and starting the coffee pot. Bob followed me the whole time, vocally cheering me on with a lot of chirps and trills. When I got settled in with my first cup of Java, I took 2 Tylenol and 2 ibuprofens and waited for the pain relievers to blissfully kick in. Unfortunately, my doorbell rang before that happened. I wasn't expecting guests, and after the last few days, I wasn't looking forward to any more surprises. I pulled the curtain back and peeked out the living room window to determine if I would treat my caller like a meat salesman with a refrigerator truck full of freezer-burned steaks he needed to sell to make his quota and pretend no one was home. I recognized the short red hair and dorky glasses right away. It was my brother, Rowan. I sighed. Although the bark was gone, I had bruises up and down my arms. On top of that, I had a swollen nose and 2 black eyes from when the rock troll had thrown me into the fence. If Rowan saw me like this, he was totally going to get all Dr. Everly on me. He knocked again. "Iris?" he shouted. "Are you home?" I hated ignoring my brother, but I played all the conversations out in my head as to why I looked like I got jumped in an alley. All of them ended with him calling the police on my behalf. I didn't want any cops sniffing around my property because what I had hidden in the backyard was a total stink bomb. At least I didn't stink anymore. After I bathed twice in the concoction Kier had suggested, I no longer smelled like troll guts. "Iris!" He knocked harder. Damn it, man, get a clue. I'd known when I'd asked him to order the drug screen for me 2 days ago that he'd worry. I could only imagine where his mind would go, thinking I'd been drugged and beaten. Unfortunately, he wasn't going away. My phone rang. Crap. I went to retrieve it from the kitchen. It was Rowan, of course. And now he'd probably heard my phone ring, giving him even more evidence I was home. I looked around my kitchen and considered escaping out the back to hide in the garden, but I knew that would be the next place Rowan went when I didn't answer my phone. I saw the essential oils, lavender and tea tree, next to the peppermint oil I'd used for the clarification spell. Linda had said lavender and tea tree were both excellent for healing wounds. Did bruises count? I hoped so. I knew the oil should be diluted, but I was desperate as I dotted each onto my arms, chest, neck, and face. I focused my intention. I didn't want my brother to worry about me. I didn't want him mixed up in any of this magic business. I wanted him and the rest of the people I cared about safe. The only way that was happening was for me to get my crap under control. Lavender and tea tree, listen to me. I rolled my eyes at my terrible rhyme as I continued to dab the oils on my skin. To be perfectly clear, for the people I care, make these bruises disappear. It wasn't Shakespeare, but I hoped it would do. A knock at my back window startled me, and I dropped the tea tree bottle on the tile. Some of the oil shot out of the tip, but the amber glass didn't break. Whew. "Iris," my brother said, obvious concern on his face. "Let me in." I grimaced. How was I going to explain my face and arms? Since hiding wasn't an option, I unlocked the back door and let him in. I waited for his million questions, but he only asked one. "Why does it stink in here?" Crap on a candle. Could he smell the troll guts? I'd tried Cure Remedy and I thought it had worked. Had I just acclimated? I mean, it happened. Michael never thought his room smelled like a cesspit. Well, you see, there was this skunk and... Skunk? When did skunks start smelling like lavender and antiseptic? Oh, he'd sniffed out the essential oils. I heard they were good for stress, I told him. He hadn't said anything about the bruises, even though when I looked at my reflection in the window, I could still see them. Weird. "So, bro, what brings you by?" My brother was not a tall man. He only stood about 5'8", a few inches taller than me. His dark hair was thinning, the lines around his eyes had deepened over the years, and he had a cute little tummy pooch. My sisters and I would give the Buddha a pat on family poker nights. It drove Rowan nuts, but we thought it was funny. He was also one of the sweetest men on the planet, which is why the severe look of concern on his face worried me. He pushed his glasses up his nose. "Iris, I got your blood work back, and I need to talk to you about the results." I'd already stopped thinking I'd been drugged, but if he was here personally to bring me bad news, maybe there'd been some merit to my initial beliefs. "What did you find? Was it LSD, PCP? Tell me." The drug panels, blood and urine, came back clean. "Well, that's a relief. I don't see the problem then." He sighed. "I'm sorry. I was worried about you, so I sent an order to the hospital lab to also do a complete chemical profile on your blood and your analysis along with the drug screens." I narrowed my eyes on him. "Ro, that's not what I asked you for." "You told me you thought you might have accidentally been drugged. You've had a wretched year, and I was concerned about you. I talked to Dahlia." "You what?" Anger thinned my lips. "You had no right, Rowan." "I know, but I'm your brother, and I'm worried about you. We all are." Apparently, my siblings had been holding Iris meetings behind my back. "I'm excellent," I lied, because I was anything but. "I don't need you all butting in. I mean, I love you, but this is my life." I'd heard the expression blood boiling mad before, but as my body burned with anger, I finally understood the term. "If that's all, you can go." He lowered his gaze. "That's not all." He gestured to my kitchen table. "I think you need to sit down for this." Bob vaulted to the counter and bumped me with his head. Rowan didn't comment on the cat, so I knew his news must be dire. "Is it cancer?" He shook his head. "I honestly don't know. I've never seen anything like this before, Iris. I want to start by retesting your blood." "What did you find?" "First, your white blood cell count is through the roof. Have you been running fevers this past week?" He reached out and touched my forehead with the back of his hand. "You feel hot right now." "That's rage," I told him. He frowned and arched his brow. "Your lymphocytes, monocytes, and your basophils are 100 times the normal limit. Your body is fighting against something really hard." Magic, I thought. My body is fighting the magic. No wonder I felt like crap. other than the obvious troll beatdown. Even more concerning is your chemical profile. The calcium in your blood is high, which can signify heart disease. Your potassium levels, magnesium levels, and sodium levels are something I've never seen before. I couldn't even find a single illness or disease that would cause all these to be so elevated. Everything he'd listed off was minerals, like the kind you find in the earth. My stomach sank. This had to be what happened to a body as wild earth magic took over. It was burning me up. The extra minerals were the beginning of dust. Even with my successful spells yesterday, I hadn't really mastered a damn thing, had I? The results were looking pretty conclusive. The supermoon and lunar eclipse was tomorrow night, and I was going to end up a pile of ash for the rest of the magic world to divide into lines and snort right up. Someone had to screw up the tests, I said. I feel great. I stretched my arms up, trying to hide my grimace of pain. It must have worked because Rowan didn't seem to notice. I want you to get tested again. Come on, with those numbers, I'd probably be dead already, right? The tension around his eyes didn't ease, but he nodded. That's true. But still, I'd feel better if you would just do them again. Fine, I said. You order them and I'll go in on Tuesday and take the tests. Why not tomorrow? He asked. I have plans tomorrow that I can't cancel. Dust day was nearly upon me. If I start feeling bad, I'll go to the emergency room, okay? I hoped my tone was calm and reassuring because the voice in my brain was anything but. And speaking of plans, I have to get ready. I'm meeting a friend. A guy friend? My brother asked. Seriously, Ro, not you two. I checked in with Michael yesterday. I knew that he and Rowan talked occasionally. I was glad my brother had stepped up for my son when he didn't feel comfortable talking to his father or me. He says you were doing some freelance editing for some guy that was here at the house on Friday. Then Marigold told me it was for her friend Kier Quinn? He said Kier's name as if it was a question. Yes, yeah, I said. I have to go to his place to nail down the details of the contract. It's a good gig, though. Rowan, after a few more minutes of reassurance that I would redo the tests and that I would call him or go to the emergency room if I got as much as a splinter, left. And so I wouldn't be a complete liar, I called Kier. He answered on the first ring. I'm in town, he said. I can swing by and get you. I nodded numbly. So much had happened in the last 4 days, from the divorce to finding out I was a witch who might die, dealing with ex-husband BS, killing a troll, and now proof that my body was failing me. He must have seen my decision in one of his visions because he said, I'll be at your house in 5. Chapter 19. The over-the-counter pain relievers had finally kicked in about the time we arrived at Kier's tiny house. After he parked, I got out and walked down to the rocky falls in his backyard, hugging my bruised arms. Yes, they were still bruised, along with my nose and eyes. I didn't know why my brother hadn't noticed, but I didn't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. Although, frankly, the gift horse could have just gotten rid of the bruises like I asked. I thought about what Rowan had said with the white blood cells. The areas of elevation were acting as if my body was treating the wild Terracraft magic coursing through my veins like an allergy or a virus. I'd been running hot since the night before, but after Rowan left, I'd taken my temperature. 102.9. Not good. Linda had said wild magic would burn in me. The blonde druid woman had said the wild magic would choke everything in its path. I was beginning to think they were both right. The high mineral count, the fever, it was all a symptom of one thing. This world was about to kiss my ash. I couldn't believe just 5 days ago I'd thought my biggest problem was going to be moving on with my life after Evan. My ex-cheater was still a concern, but not in the same way. If something happened to me, Michael would be stuck with Evan. Did I think Evan loved our son? Absolutely. Did I think he was selfish for putting his own desires above his family's? Yup, that was true too. Which is why I was worried that he might not step up if I died. Michael would be okay though, right? He had my dad, my sisters, and my brother to look out for him, and only one more year of high school to get through. "Can I beat this?" I asked Keir when he walked up and stood beside me. "Yes," he said. "You've seen that future?" I asked. "No." He picked up a stone and tossed it into the stream. "Things have been fuzzy lately. It's as if I can see 1,000 possibilities leading up to tomorrow night's lunar eclipse. Still, no matter what choice you make, I can't see the outcome." "Not a single one?" He shook his head. "I'm sorry." "I guess it's a done deal then. If you can't see my future, Keir, then it means I don't have one." "I refuse to believe that." He rubbed the star-shaped scar on his wrist. "I won't believe it." He clenched his fists. I watched his knuckles blanch white from the effort. I reached over and put my hand on his. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he opened his hands. His palms were bloody where his nails had dug in. I laced my fingers with his. Keir had said he was bonded to me, that I was his purpose. If I was gone, would he be there for Michael? I hoped so. Almost as much for Keir's sake. I knew what it was like to be a mother, to feel a devotion to another human being that will last me until the day I die. The way Keir had explained his calling reminded me of that kind of devotion. If anything ever happened to Michael, I didn't know how I'd stand this world. I didn't want that for Keir. It wasn't his fault he'd been magically screwed by fate. If I couldn't fight the burn, I needed to know he'd be okay. "Is there a spell or something that can break your connection to me?" He clenched his jaw and turned his stealing gaze on it. "Don't even think about it, Iris." "It's not fair to you," he cut me off. "If you try to sever the bond, it will be a betrayal of my existence." "But if we could make it as if that tie between us never existed, then you would be free. You won't have to experience the pain of my failure." "Or the joy of your success," he added. "That too," I agreed. "But it's not looking good for me, pal." "Is anything easy ever worthwhile?" I snorted a laugh. "Absolutely. Easy is the best." Oh, how I longed for easy. But life seldom gave you what you wanted. I thought of my mother and her predicament. She might have had a terminal diagnosis, but we hadn't expected her to pass so quickly. On one hand, I'd been thankful she hadn't had to suffer long. On the other hand, I hadn't gotten to say my goodbye. No closure between us at the end of her final chapter. I'd often wondered what we would have done differently, or what she would have done differently, if we had known she only had one more day to live. "If you knew you only had one night to live, what would you do with it?" I asked. He stared far off as if he could see past the horizon. "I don't know," he finally said. "What would you do?" I smiled, even as an extreme chill rushed through me and I began to shiver. I know the romantic answer would be to find some hot guy to sleep with and fall madly in love. But that's fairy tales, and this is real life. Keir was sexy enough for the hot guy part, and as to falling madly in love, I cared about him, but I wasn't sure the in love part was possible overnight. This isn't a fairy tale, and I'm not some damsel in distress who is content to do nothing while I wait to be rescued. Because if my rescue never comes, then what? So, if this is my last night, I want to spend it with people I care about. My dad, my sisters, my brother, my son, Bob, Linda, and you. Keir chuckled. I'm glad I made it on the list, even if I did come after the imp and the gnome. He turned to face me and brought my knuckles to his lips. I have faith in you, Iris. I believe you will face the test and survive it. But if you want tonight to be a family night, then I am on board 100%. Like I told you before, I got your back. He grinned and wrapped his arms around me. If possible, I felt even colder. Nerd, I said. I glanced at the bruises on my shoulders. What about these? He let me go and looked at my arms. These? The question hung between us for a few seconds. My upper body looks like I went 10 rounds with Mike Tyson back when he was biting ears off. Keir frowned as he stared down at me. His dark hair fell forward over his eyes. I don't see any bruises, Iris. I lifted my arms. How can you not see this? The entire spectrum of purples was visible from my hands to my shoulders. Or this. I pointed to my face. I'd give Rocket Raccoon a run for his money when it came to black eyes. Honestly, you look beautiful. I was surprised when I first saw you because I was sure last night when I left you that you would be a mess today. But you appear none the worse for wear. Oh man, I was definitely worse for wear. Had I done another screwy incantation? When my brother came by this morning, I tried to cast a healing spell. Okay, Keir said. Did anything happen? I thought it hadn't because I can still see the battering my body took, but Rowan didn't freak out. I thought it was strange, but then he told me the results of my blood panel and my appearance seemed the least of my troubles. The chill in the air was getting more severe. Did the temperature just drop 40 degrees? My teeth chattered. I'm so cold. Keir cupped my face. You are burning up, Iris. I had a fever earlier. I think you still do. He put his arm around me. I'm taking you home. Okay. As we walked to the car, my skin buzzed as if electrified. Great. I was burning, freezing, and frying, and it wasn't even dust day. I don't feel right. A loud screech echoed off the rock cliff wall, and a great gray-winged creature came swooping down on Keir and me. My frozen limbs and fever-addled brain thought I was having another hallucination, until Keir threw us both to the ground and hissed, Gargoyle. What? A gargoyle? I just fought off a troll the day before. I'd used all the energy in my body, and I wasn't sure I had the strength in me to defeat another creature. Besides, Linda hadn't mentioned anything about gargoyles. My eyes grew big as I watched the beast with a wingspan of at least 8 feet wide claw at Keir's back. The pain in his face as he kept me covered and protected was too much to bear. Don't! I tried to shove him away, but he bracketed me with his arms and legs, his face inches from mine. Save yourself, I said. Tears crystallized in his gray eyes as he stared down at me. Protecting you is how I save myself. His voice was low, hollow, and inhuman. Close your eyes, Iris, he said through gritted teeth. I don't want you to see this. Only I couldn't look away. However, I was not prepared for what happened next. Dark brown fur sprouted over Keir's cheeks as he roared when the gargoyle sunk its claws into his back. Then my gentle druid's mouth widened, and his teeth became hideous fangs. His ears elongated, moving up his scalp to the top of his head, and his eyes turned pitch black. Sharp antlers, 5 points each, shot from the top of his skull, and his arms had grown to the size of tree trunks. He stared down at me, saliva dripping from his frightening maw. He lifted one hand from the ground, and out of his fingertips were claws that looked as if they were made of black diamonds. He reached over his shoulder and ripped the gargoyle away, throwing the stone beast a good 20 feet. Whatever Keir had turned into stood at its full height taller than the troll, so over 10 feet, and about as wide. He turned his attention to the gargoyle, and in one ferocious leap he was on our attacker. He ripped off the wings as if the stony monster was nothing more than a fly, and then he plunged his terrible claws deep into the gargoyle's heart and pulled it straight out its chest. The fever blurred my vision, but within seconds Keir was back. My Keir, not the thing he'd turned into. He was cradling me. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? I shook my head. What? I'll explain later, he said. He picked me up and carried me to his car. Gently, he put me in the back seat and covered me with a light blanket. "Rest now, Iris. I'll get you help, I promise." I patted his cheek. "And you keep your promises." He smiled down at me. "I surely do." Chapter 20. I dreamed of beastly bunnies with long ears and short tails, giant antlers and fangy teeth. In other words, Stephen King's version of Alice in Wonderland. Only instead of the rabbit being late, he was ripping the heart out of the Queen of Hearts and her entire deck of soldiers. I jolted awake to the beep, beep, beep of a nearby machine. I was in a white room, in a strange, uncomfortable bed, oxygen tubing up my nose and an IV stuck in my arm. Okay, this was definitely the hospital, but things were still a little fuzzy on the how. "She's awake," I heard someone say. Seconds later, my son walked in, looking more worried than I'd ever seen him. I couldn't stop the tears from clouding my vision as he gave me a quick hug. My dad, a large man with gray hair and the biggest capacity for love, followed behind him. Then Rose and her husband Don, their boys Drake and Dustin, my oldest sister Dahlia, Marigold, and Rowan. And right at the back, carrying a suspiciously familiar duffel bag, was Kier. My energy was low, but I managed to smile as each one gave me a kiss hello. When it was Kier's turn, he set the bag down, then leaned over and kissed my cheek. "You said you wanted a family night." "Not like this," I touched his arm, "but I'll take it." My dad was talking loudly, ordering my siblings about, telling people to give me space. Then he sat down on the edge of my bed and he held my hand. "You gave us quite the scare there, girlie." "Sorry, Dad." He patted my cheek. "How come you didn't tell me you weren't feeling well?" "It came on suddenly, Dad. I didn't know I was getting sick, honest." "Well, you're getting help now. That's what counts." His almost colorless blue eyes were red and watery. I'd really scared him. Losing Mom, his one great love, had been hard for him, though I'm sure he still hadn't gotten over it. I knew it was killing him to see me like this, but he put on a brave face for his children, though. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too, kiddo." Before he could move away, I tugged him back. "I love you, Dad." A strange look passed across his face, but he shook it off. "I love you too." Rowan went into Dr. Everly mode. "You had a fever of over 106.2 when your friend brought you into the emergency room. Luckily, the nurse on duty recognized your name and called me." "Luckily," I said with a wan smile. Michael made a choking sound that broke my heart. I'd really scared him. "I'm okay, babe," I said, but it was hard to convince him when I was on oxygen and hooked up to an IV. Rowan gave me a look of frustration. "If you had listened to me this morning—" "You're right," I said to head off any arguing. I didn't want to debate the merits of modern medicine in the treatment of mystical ailments. I should have gone to the hospital earlier. My concession mollified him some. "We managed to get the fever down with anti-fever meds, a cooling blanket, and the IV to get your hydration up. But you still have a low-grade fever. We're running more tests to see if you have an infection. But the doctor put you on an antibiotic as prophylaxis, to treat any infections you have or that might develop. If we get lucky, it could have you back on your feet in no time." I waved for my brother to come over to me. When he was standing next to me, I rubbed his belly. "There, that's all the good luck I need." He flicked me on the nose. "Knucklehead." I leaned my head back on my pillow and closed my eyes. Damn, I was tired. Rose, as usual, took charge. "Okay," she said. "Everybody out. Iris needs her rest." She moved Rowan out of the way and hugged me. "I'll take care of Michael," she said. "Don't you worry about him. You concentrate on getting better, you hear me?" Emotion choked me. "Thank you," I croaked as I fought back the tears again. "Leave it to Rose to bring the temperature of a room down," Marigold teased. She, like me, used humor in stressful situations, but she went in for another hug as well and whispered, "See, I told you Kier was a keeper." "You actually said he was hot." She wiggled her brows. "Same thing. Get better. I can't be the only sister who knows how to have fun." "You got it." Dahlia, the oldest and the most stoic of the bunch, was wearing a velvet tracksuit, her favorite leisure wear. She'd let her hair gray naturally, and she had a beautiful silver streak on one side that gave her an air of sophistication that she totally owned. "I love you," she said simply. Tears wet my eyes again. "Damn you, Dahlia." She smiled. That awesome bitch knew exactly what she was doing when it came to heartstring tugging. "I'll see you later." I nodded. Yep. Don and the boys left after Rose, and my dad and Michael went home shortly after that. "You be good," I told Michael. "I will," he said. "You know I love you, and I'm so proud of you. You're the best son a mother could want." "Mom," he said my name like a complaint as he wiped his eyes. "I love you too." "I know you do. I never doubt it." My dad put his arm around Michael and they left, leaving Rowan and Kier. I gave my brother a sideways glance. "Can you give me a minute with Kier?" Sure," Rowan said. "Yep, I'll be out in the hall." "Hey, Ro?" "Yeah?" he replied. "Thanks for looking out for me." "That's what big brothers do." He opened the door, gave it a quick pat, and exited. "I don't think your brother likes me," Kier said when we were alone. "If you think I was so delirious that I don't remember you turning into vampire bunny-elope with gnarly claws and teeth, you are sadly mistaken." I kept my tone light because I wasn't mad at him. Did it freak me out? A bit, yeah. But if he hadn't turned into whatever he turned into, we both would have died. He lifted the duffel bag up and said, "What if I give you what's in this bag as a bribe for you to let this one go?" The reason the bag looked familiar was because it was mine. The last time I'd used it was for an overnight work trip. "I don't care what's in the bag. I need to know what you are." He pinched the zipper and opened it up. An impishly impish imp popped his adorably chubby face out of the opening. I bit back a cry. "Bob!" "Shh," Kier said. "No animals on the premises unless they're licensed support animals." "Bob isn't licensed, but he should be bottled and sold as a cure for the blues." I hugged my snuggly cuddle monkey. "I love you, Bob." In the same breath, I said to Kier, "This doesn't get you out of an explanation." He sighed, heavily. "I told you that I had to do some things before I could take on the commitment of our bond. This," he spread his hands wide, "was that thing. My sacrifice in order to be strong enough to fight beside you. Otherwise, I would have been a liability." "Just spit it out, man," I said in a baby talk voice as I scratched Bob's back right in front of his twitchy, nubby tail. "I'm a puka." "A poohoo?" Kier closed his eyes and grimaced. "A shapeshifter. I can turn into animals." "And one scary-ass monster." "Yes," he agreed. "That too." "What, you can turn into other animals?" I thought about the long-eared rabbit that had taken a particular interest in my garden since spring. "Have you been spying on me?" He frowned. "I like to think of it as watching out for you, but—" I giggled. "I forgive you, especially since you saved my life. What there is left of it." He gave me a worried look. "Iris." "Don't." I pressed my palm against his cheek. "Thank you for protecting me." He nodded. "You're welcome." "So, is the future any clearer? Did getting me to the hospital fix anything?" "I still can't see past right now, but you're alive. That's something, right?" "It is." I stroked Bob's fur as he curled up on my stomach. "Thanks for bringing Bob. He's the best medicine. Kier grinned. It's how he's made. I know. I gave him an irritated glance. And I don't care. We all have something, Mr. Puka. Rowan stuck his head in the room. Visiting hours are over. You need to recover your strength. And the brother had spoken. Kier teased me after Rowan closed the door. What am I going to do tomorrow? If this is how my magic is behaving the day before this mystical time bomb event, I'm scared. Kier sat down on the bed next to me and placed his palm on the left side of my chest. As long as this beats, there's hope. And I'm not going to stop fighting for you until there is nothing more to fight for. He'd said the bond was such that he would give his life for mine, and now his words scared me so much. Promise me you won't try to sacrifice yourself for me. The corner of his mouth tugged into a half smile. I don't make promises I can't keep. There was a moment when I thought he'd lean over and kiss me, but a rapid knock on the door put an end to it. Rowan is such a buzzkill, I said. Kier's gray eyes flickered toward the door, then back to me. Then, without fanfare, he dipped his head, and with only the slightest hesitation, his lips met mine. It was soft at first, just a gentle brush of mouth against mouth, but then the pressure became a little more insistent. Whew, talk about intention. The sizzle from the kiss was electrifying, so much so I almost looked around for another gargoyle attack. When he finished, I blinked up into those gorgeous gray eyes. That was unexpected. He grinned mischievously and winked at me. I saw it coming. Chapter 21. A nurse had seen Bob and had given him to Kier to take home. She'd warned him he'd be banned if he brought the cat back. What a biatch. I really had a lot of respect for the profession, but anyone who could take one look at Bob and not melt, well, that was a person I didn't want to know. My fever spiked again at midnight. D-Day. It rose to 104.2. The nurse pushed IV paracetamol to bring it down, but it held steady. That's when they brought the cooling blanket in. Thank heavens I'd been passed out the first time they'd used it because this felt like actual torture. A blonde nurse came in wearing a surgical mask, a cap, and a gown. Did they think I was contagious? I'm going to take you for a treatment, Miss Everly. Doctor's orders. She yanked up the rails on my bed, unhooked the IV bag from the pole, and hung it on a hook at the top of the hospital bed. The earlier nurse had put me back on oxygen. This one took it off. What kind of treatment? I asked. It's something that will help manage your pain, she said. My fevered brain registered something was wrong, off about the nurse, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Even so, I wanted pain relief. Every muscle, every nerve fiber, even my hair hurt. When we got on the elevator, she took down her mask. She had scars on her face that I recognized, but I wondered if my fever was sending my brain bad signals. I narrowed my gaze at her. I know you. Yes, Iris, you do, and we don't have much time. You're Blondie the boss bitch. Of course, I still might have been experiencing a fever delusion. I mean, just because the first time had been real doesn't mean this time was. The woman smiled. Yes, and I'm going to help you. Oh, okay. The idea of help was grand. I just wished she'd hurry up and do whatever she was going to do. Hell, I think I would have taken a knock in the head at this point. I started perspiring profusely as if all the liquid was leaving my body. Sweaty, I said. Drenched. Your fever's breaking, she explained. That's nice. I gave her a lazy smile. Where are we going? I can't let you turn to dust in a hospital bed. There would be too many questions. I nodded. That makes sense. I reached out and stroked her hand. Ouch. The contact had been like raking my fingers over hot coals or acid. In other words, it burned. Kier had said he believed in me. Linda, maybe she believed in me. Bob, he was my cuddly, yummy num-num. I craned my head back so I could look at Blondie. "Do you think I'm going to die?" I asked her. She smiled down at me as she shoved the bed out of the elevator and into a carport. "I'm counting on it." I blinked. "What?" My limbs felt numb and my eyes felt heavy. "Did you do something to me?" "Just added propofol and fentanyl in your paracetamol." She winked. "It'll paralyze you for a short time and keep you nice and docile so I can transfer you to a safe spot, but it'll wear off soon enough." "Safe for who?" "For me, of course." She gestured with her hand for someone to come over, and two someones, both men, unhooked me from the IV and moved me out of bed. They shoved my useless body into the back of a cargo van. I was scared, angry, and my veins were on fire. Also, the stupid hospital gown I was in was up around my waist. Will someone at least cover my ass? "Drive," Blondie said to one of her henchmen. She threw a blanket over me. "Don't worry, Iris. This will all be over for you soon." I concentrated on moving my fingers. If I could move even one, I told myself, then I would find a way out of this. I knew my chances of surviving, let alone escaping, were slim, but little victories might keep me from losing my mind. "Why are you doing this? You're a druid. I thought you were on my side." One of the men chuckled. That was never good. "I'm going to share you with my cabal. Your earth magic is something we haven't seen in, well, ever. How someone so wild in her terracraft managed to tear apart a rock troll, that's going to be the stuff of legends, honey." "Cabal? You are really going all in on the movie villain stereotype." My pinky finger twitched. I celebrated on the inside because the outside of me was still 99.9% not functional. "And don't call me honey, honey," I added, just because I hated it when people I didn't know, especially assholes who drugged and kidnapped me, called me things like honey, sugar, sweetie, or darling. Friends or family, totally cool. Strangers and psychopathic druids could suck it. And oh my gosh, my big toe wiggled. The sweat was dripping off me now. The carpet under me was soaked. This didn't feel like a normal fever breaking. What's wrong with me? My tongue was so dry it kept sticking to the roof of my mouth. "I need water," I croaked. "She's accelerating," Blondie said. "Drive faster." My other fingers started to move. They were stiff, but the movement was progressing. I wasn't sure what I would accomplish with one toe and 5 fingers, but I needed the win. The skin on my face and arms began to tighten down as if squeezing my bones. I wasn't panicking, and I didn't know why. Was I frightened? Totally. Did I want to die? No way. But instead of out of my head scared, I was super chill. What is it the blonde nutjob had said? "Propofol and fentanyl in your paracetamol." Oh, right. Fentanyl. My guess was I was high enough to take the edge off, but not so high as to be unaware of what was happening to me. Deep down, I really wished she'd given me a much bigger dose. "Water," I said again. "You're starting to mummify," Blondie smiled. "Did you know that the human body is made up of 60% water?" Duh, I had to take life science in school like everyone else. I'm sure my sarcasm had been impossible to read since my words were raspy and barely audible. The skin on my neck constricted, and it felt like I was wearing a turtleneck 5 sizes too small for me. Is this what turning to ash was like? All the liquid leaves the body, and the organic parts of you dry up and poof, dust? I was still confused by Kyr's boss's evil behavior, though. I was sure the Druids were the good guys, right? But this one had her own cabal. Is that what a Druid circle was called? Why didn't I ask more questions? Maybe because my life had been one reaction after another since this mystical crap show had started. Was this it? Was this how it ended? At least I'd seen everyone I loved and told them how I felt. I'd said goodbye. That meant something, right? The van jostled to a stop. "We're here," one of the dudes said. "Get her out," the blonde directed. "Put her on the altar." I think the water loss cleared some of the fentanyl from my system because my entire body screamed with pain before I went completely numb. My head cleared enough for me to panic. Linda had warned me about earth elementals, but the people she said were the most dangerous to me were the Hexenmeister. Ah, damn it. Boss Bitch was a sorcerer. She had to be. Linda had said there was no way to detect one unless they used their borrowed power. Surely Kyr would have known if she was a baddie. Had the blonde druid been hiding her gifts this whole time? Or did she decide that being a druid wasn't enough and she wanted a witch's power for herself? Was I to be her first sacrifice? The two men carried me log-style to the altar. My leg bone snapped. I heard it. I saw it dangling, but I still couldn't feel it. The magic flaming through me must have short-circuited my pain receptors. The guys dropped me hard on the stone altar. This one wasn't white like I'd seen with the Druid Circle. Instead, this one was yellow marble. I could see some of the runes, but like before, I didn't know what they meant. If I had do-overs, I'd make Kyr teach me everything he knew about this stuff so I wouldn't be caught unawares again. The Blonde's cabal, as she called her group, was made up of what seemed like a dozen men and women in red cowls. Were they serious? Did they shop for clothes at Villains R Us? "Are you sure there's enough of me to go around? I'm more of a snack than a family dinner kind of meal." My voice was more of a dry hiss than anything with a tone, so I'm not sure she heard me, but a woman in a red robe laughed. Blondie stood over me, her arms held out wide. "The time is near. She's almost dust, my brothers and sisters. After tonight, we shall no longer be protectors of the witch's powers. We will be the powerful. And with this earth sacrifice, we will begin the journey to claim our strength for the fight that is yet to come." Yet to come? I remembered Linda or Kyr or someone talking about a larger threat down the road. Were they the weapons and I was the ammunition? And were the other members of Blondie's cabal druids as well? Kyr was so noble and true in his commitment to me that I hadn't even imagined that any of the druids could be corrupt. I wished Kyr was here. His evil antlered rabbit form would take these assholes down in a flash. But he wasn't. It was me. I only had myself to rely on, and myself could have been an extra on any one of the mummy movies. The Brendan Fraser ones, of course. I guess the high mineral counts in my blood work had all been leading up to this moment. Soon I would be a magical chum for the circling sorcerers. If only I had ingredients. I could weave a spell. It might or might not work, but at least I would go out knowing I tried. I wanted to be free of these witch wannabe jerks, but 4 days had not been a lot of time to learn how to defend myself. One by one, the Hexenmeister approached. Each one of them placed a single kiss on my forehead. I tried hissing at them, but my lungs were barely functioning. The one who laughed lifted her cowl slightly so I could see her face. Shock and rage churned inside me. Lou Ann Danvers. I had liked her, damn it. We were going out for dancing and drinks. No, I couldn't believe she was one of those Hexen idiots. She gave me a little wink, and if I could have punched her in the face, I would have with pleasure. I would kill her. I would kill them all for this. The rage sharpened my mind, but it also brought back some of the pain. Good, I thought. The pain lets me know I'm alive. Did I have herbs and spices? Nope. But I wasn't entirely without earth ingredients. I called on the calcium, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and whatever other was left in me to do my bidding. I was a witch. I had the spark of true craft, not these thieves, and I was not going down without a fight. I couldn't vocalize my incantation, so I mouthed it. Make me whole, muscle to muscle, bone to bone, make my flesh from bits of stone. There was no surge of power. Argh! I wanted my body back so I can make these hexen bitches pay. I mouthed it again. Make me whole, muscle to muscle, bone to bone, make my flesh from bits of stone. Blondie must have seen my lips moving because she leaned down. No time for last words, she said. It'll be over soon. For you, I hissed. Oh, progress. Make me whole, muscle to muscle, bone to bone, make my flesh from bits of stone. The energy inside me surged, finally. Triumphantly, I added, give me strength to stand alone in this body built of stone. Let me bring my enemies down, especially this stupid blonde clown. Blondie blanched as I sat up. Strap her down, she said, staggering away from me. I reached into the soil around me, looking for anything to use as a weapon. Then I found the perfect tool. Wild morning glory, also known as bindweed. Let's see how she liked being choked out by wild magic. The ground began to shake as tendrils of thin, thread-like vines erupted from the grass. The blonde's shocked expression was almost as good as the screams from her cabal as the weeds did my bidding. Then she turned and ran. Chapter 22. My body felt stiff as I got to my feet. I was impressed by the way the Terracraft had fixed my broken leg, and I was no longer in blinding pain or dying of thirst. I stood on the altar and aimed my magic at the cabal. Binding, winding, growing strong, do my bidding, undo this wrong. The vines yanked the cabal down one by one. Apparently, I was decent at Terracraft as long as I was pissed off. That seemed to be when it worked the best. Bind and wind, choke them out, make them scream, make them shout. Red-robed bodies writhed on the ground as the vines tightened around them, holding them hostage. Luann howled as she threw off her bad guy costume. Under her robe, she was dressed in military black, and she was strapped up with knives and guns. She wore a bulletproof vest. A howl in the distance answered back. Did I want to know what was coming? Probably not. I tried to stand, but legs made of minerals didn't move so fast. Luann leaped through the air like a ninja warrior on steroids with her knife held aloft, and I readied my magic. If I could crack a troll like an egg, she wouldn't be too difficult to dispatch. Right? Her fierce cry gave me pause as she landed next to me and aimed the blade downward behind me. I whipped around and saw one of Blondie's henchmen drop an actual freaking scythe. Lou's dagger had plunged into his neck, and he grabbed the blade as he fell to the ground. I'm with Kier, she said. He's on his way. Can you move? I nodded. I think so. I still wasn't sure I could trust Luann, but I wanted to. I wanted to believe that I wasn't alone. Because the worst part of the painless nothing had been the knowledge that I would die surrounded by strangers and not the people I loved. As the bindweed sought out members of Blondie's cabal, the red-robed assholes who weren't already bound scrambled to their feet and scattered. Luann jumped down, throwing up her arm as a guy tried to strike her with a mace. She dropped down and nailed him in the nuts with an uppercut. It worked better for her against the man than it had for me with the troll, and the guy went down. I used my power to tie him up with the weeds. I climbed down off the altar. My magic pulsed through me, a living thing that obeyed me without question. I felt powerful, like I could take on the whole world. "Another one bites the dust," Luann said. "Get it?" She was having way too much fun, considering I had almost died, and she hadn't done a damn thing to help. Still, I could appreciate the enthusiasm. "Where did Bogmal go?" she asked. I shrugged. I'd forgotten the blonde was named Bogmal. "She took off when I, fixed myself." Luann laughed. "Yeah, you did." She held up her hand for a high five. I left her hanging, much the way she had left me hanging on the altar. "Aw, come on," Luann said, following me as I made sure every Hexen dick that hadn't managed to escape was bound, tightly. "You can't be mad at me. I was here to help you." "Some help?" "Look, there wasn't a thing I could do if you couldn't get your magic under control. Jumping in sooner would have just gotten us both dead." She wasn't wrong, but I still wasn't ready to let her off the hook. I scoured the surroundings, searching for Bogmal. "Are you a sorcerer?" I asked. "Oh, hell no," she said. "I just play one on TV." She raised her hand. "Kidding. I'm a druid, like Kier. I followed you up here from the hospital, parked my motorcycle about a mile down the road, found one of these piss ants taking a leak, stabbed them, stole their bathrobe, bing, bang, boom, Bob's your uncle." "Bob's my imp." "You know what I mean. Anyway, I called Kier as soon as I got on the road, but the cell phone reception is non-existent out here. I'm pretty sure he's coming in all warrior puka." "You know about his—" I hissed, then made a scary bunny face. "For a while now," she said, "but I only started working with Kier about 5 years ago after I got out of the service." "So you didn't take a class from me 18 years ago?" "Nah," Lou said, "but I bet you would have been a blast." I shook my head. "I don't know about that." I wondered about her connection with Kier. He must trust her if she knew his secret. "How long have you known him? Kier, I mean." Before she could answer, an earth-shattering roar preceded several trees getting knocked down as a giant puka ran out of the woods. When its black eyes locked on mine, it dropped down to all fours and sprinted the rest of the way to my location. When it was in front of me, he changed. Within seconds, I was staring into those gorgeous gray eyes. "You're alive," he said. "Mostly." I picked leaves from his hair. Luann turned away from us. "Gross, Kier. You need to start carrying a backpack." She grabbed the robe she'd discarded. "Here." He chuckled as he put it on. He glanced at Luann, then back at me. "I see you've met my sister." I don't know why the news relieved me, but it did. I wanted to be mad that he hadn't told me sooner, but really, we'd known each other for less than a week. I clenched my fist. "Do I feel hard to you?" "That's what he said," Luann smirked. I laughed. "You're terrible." "You'll come to love that about me." I grinned at her. "I'm sure I will." I turned my attention back to Kier. "I made myself out of minerals. I don't feel rigid when I touch it, but I'm worried that I've been gnomified." He squeezed my forearm. "It's more firm than your normal muscle tone, but not rock hard." I guess that was a consolation. "Can I kiss you again?" "You didn't ask permission the last time." "The last time, I didn't know if I would get another chance." I raised up on my toes as he leaned down. Our lips met, and wowza, it was magic. "So I'm really okay? No more dust?" "No more dust," Kier said. He kissed me once more. "We gotta go," Luann said. "Don't know what happened to Bogmal, but she'll be back." "Wait, Bogmal did this?" Kier said. "She's been the leader of my grove for over 10 years. "Dude," Lou nodded. "Surprised the crap out of me, too. When I saw her stuff Iris in the van, it threw me for a loop. I'm safe now, and she won't get the upper hand on me again. At least I hoped not. Keir caressed my face. We'll get her. Together, I said. He nodded. Together. But for now, we need to get you back to the hospital so we can call off the search party. Luann glanced around at the trapped sorcerers in training. I'll take care of these yahoos. I gave her a wary glance. I don't want to know how, do I? She shook her head. Probably for the best. She tossed some keys to Keir. These are for the van. Took them off the guy who drove it here. Keir easily caught the keys. See you soon. Thanks, I told her. Like the gnome, Lou was growing on me. Then I turned to Keir. You ready? Keir held my hand and said, for whatever comes next. 2 weeks later. No, Kleinkind, not like that, Linda said as she pelted me with another rock. As a side effect of rebuilding myself with my own minerals, it hurt way less than it had before. She clapped her gnomey little hands. Again. I couldn't be mad at her. Linda had become a real mentor to me. Besides, when I'd returned home after my hospital stay, she'd sobbed so hard I thought she was going to blow off her winkle pickers. Keir and I had come up with a cover story that I'd awoken hungry, my fever gone, and I'd gone in search of food. I'd worried about security videos, but Lou assured me she'd taken care of all of that. Keir's sister was funny, pretty, stupidly scary, and we were becoming the best of friends. I did the blood tests again that my brother wanted, but Lou helped there, too. She switched my blood sample with hers before the lab got a hold of it. Lo and behold, everything came back normal. My brother was sure I'd had some kind of infection, and the antibiotic I'd gotten in the hospital had fixed it. I was happy for him to believe that. Everyone in my family had been relieved that I was okay. My dad swore I took 5 years off his life. I hoped that wasn't true. And Michael, I shook my head. It was 5 days after I got home before he'd left the house again. My hospitalization had really scared him. Evan still hadn't talked to him about leaving. I swore if that man didn't do right by my kid, I was going to practice a little true craft in his direction. I put my fingertips against a boulder and said, I am the rock is me. Don't resist, let me enter thee. I sunk my fingers to the knuckles. Look, I did it! I'm fingering the rock! I laughed. It earned me another pebble to the forehead. Keir walked out the back door. Cool, he said as I wiggled my free thumb at him. I'm pretty sure this was how Arthur's sword got in the stone. I reversed my fingers, and this time the stone didn't take the top layer of skin. Success! Are you ready for dinner? Does she look ready, Druid? Linda asked. Can you give me about 20 minutes? I want to write this fingers in stone spell down and change clothes. Into your good yoga pants? The gnome asked. Smartass. Shut up, Linda. You know, the spell has a real name. It's not called Fingers in Rock Spell, she chided. I'll call it what I want, I shot back. Adding spells to my grimoire had become a source of great joy for me. Every new thing I learned, I eagerly wrote it down. Bogmaw was gone, but I knew she'd be back. She'd blown up her druid gig to try and steal my magic, and I couldn't see her just giving up. Next time, though, I would be ready for her. Sure, Keir said. Great. I skipped up to the house, feeling better than I had in such a long time. Keir and I were taking things slow, and I was glad. I wasn't ready for anything too heavy. And while I couldn't see my future the way Keir sometimes could, I knew he'd always have a place in my life, no matter what path our relationship took. His birth bond to me pretty much guaranteed it. I took the grimoire from the top shelf of my closet and sat down on my bed. Bob hopped up beside me. I petted him absently as I placed my hand on the cover over the earth symbol. It was a ritual of mine, something I'd done multiple times. Only now, It burned as a new surge of energy rushed through me. I snatched my hand away. I watched in horror as the upside-down triangle moved to the left, and on the right, a right-way-up triangle appeared. Kier! I was finally getting used to my new life. I had no idea what the symbol meant, but I knew it couldn't be anything good. He burst into the room. What is it? Look. I pointed to the cover. What in the hell is this? He blinked a few times, then met my gaze. It's fire. He shook his head. But that's impossible. I rubbed my palm. It burned me. Kier took my hand and turned it over. There's no injury. I can still feel it. I stared at the new symbol with a mixture of fear and awe. I thought once an element chooses a witch, that's it. That's her one true craft. He hovered his hands over the grimoire and closed his eyes. I watched his eyes twitch beneath his lids as if in REM sleep. What? What do you see? His whole body was practically vibrating. I stood up and grabbed his hands. Tell me. There's so many futures at once that I can't discern one from the other, he said. But the fire symbol appearing on the grimoire next to the earth can only mean one thing. What? What does it mean? Kier's gray eyes swirled as if in a trance. Iris, he declared, you've been claimed by Igniscraft. No, I denied. I'm Earth. I'm a Terracraft witch, and I'm finally starting to get decent at it. He gazed down at me, his brow pinched with worry. According to your grimoire, you're both. I swallowed the lump in my throat and fought down the panic. Well, shit. This concludes the reading of Earth Spells Are Easy, Grimoires of a Middle-Aged Witch, Book 1, by Renee George. Copyright 2021 by Renee George. This book was read by Autumn Brandt. This unabridged recording was published by arrangement with Renee George and was produced in 2022 by Renee George, who holds the copyright. Neither this recording nor any portion of it may be reproduced or used for any purpose without prior written authorization from Blackstone Publishing.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.